there. Have you been feeling just a little bit, I don't know, constrained lately? Okay, and you would really like to know what freedom looks like? Well, I would too. So watch the following video, like or subscribe, and peace. Hello there, my name is Billie Juliana. I'm 49 years old and I have a 40-year history of dealing with anorexia nervosa, and I'm currently following the recovery methods espoused by Tabitha Farrar, Kayla Rose Katecki, and Elisa Orris. And today, yes, I do want to talk about freedom, and not necessarily in anorexia recovery, because in anorexia recovery, we have complete and utter freedom to eat unrestrictedly and to rest for a prolonged period, maybe forever if we want to, and never to suppress our body weights again. So that is just right there on the table. That is our utter and complete freedom that we have. But I wanted to talk about freedom of expression and free to be me. And this just came up because I remembered someone from my past just recently. He popped into my head and I thought, well, the timing of this may be apropos. And so I'm going to talk about this guy that I knew who was able to just exemplify freedom because he was free in being who he was. And I want to be like that. So that's something that I am trying to achieve also as I go through anorexia recovery, because let me tell you, the eating disorder has held me back. And even though I don't have a clear picture of who I am, I want to be able to be free to be who I am once I get rid of the anorexia. So that's just a goal that I've got. And I want to talk about this particular person because to me, again, he exemplified freedom of being. But before I do that, I want to talk about a couple of things that I thought were pretty funny because I wanted to inject some levity into this video. And actually talking about this guy in general is a pretty lighthearted affair in and of itself. But there are some things out there that are going around to help lighten the mood, because I know a lot of us are feeling extra stressed and extra anxious as we go through these very uncertain times. And so some people have thought of new apps for the phones, and they're kind of jokey apps. And one of the new apps is an app that tells you whether it's dark outside. And I thought that was pretty funny because I don't know about you, but are y'all losing track of time? I completely am like, what day is today? And I don't know what time it is. And I'm like, is it dark outside? Because if it's dark outside, I'm going to bed. That's just how I feel these days. It's just crazy. And I thought it was cool that somebody would thought of an app that would actually tell you if it's dark outside, because other people are feeling the same way. And then another person had thought of an app that is a fake shower. Basically, it creates the noise of a shower for when you go to the bathroom. So you turn it on when you go to the bathroom and it creates white noise, a shower. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please, give me that app, invent it, let me have it. I need it. My whole family needs it. I'm telling you, I live with older people and I'm not so young myself. And so we all need that app on our phones. Unfortunately, I think that what that would do is that would create a situation in our household these days where the shower would be running all the time. So that might not work out so well, but I want to just try it. So anyway, that's the lightheartedness that I wanted to inject in this video. If you have funny apps that you have thought of in this uncertain, crazy time, if you've gotten creative in your brain, please leave in the comments some apps that you would like to see invented for your own personal use. Okay? All right, now let me jump to talking about this person that, like I said before, to me exemplifies absolute freedom of being. Now, at the time, he was 21, 22 years old. He had just graduated from college here in Nashville. And I was 27, and I was still in the process of getting through college because my eating disorder had interrupted my college stay time and time again. And so it took me a long time to get through college. So I was about to return to college, but for an interim period here for about a year and a half, I worked as a receptionist in a law office. I was constantly going into law offices and working in some way, shape, or form. And so I was working as a receptionist in this law office. And this person, his name is Greg. Greg worked as the courier for the law office. And so when he first started working, I had been working there already a couple of months when he came on. And when he first started working, we realized that we lived fairly close to one another, and so we should just carpool into work together. And that was a great idea. And so the way it worked was I went to pick him up at his house. Now, he lived in a house that he shared with a bunch of college people, not just guys and girls, recent grads. And so it was kind of a ramshackle, bumbly-wumbly house that he lived in, and you can imagine. And but I'd go there and I'd pick him up, and then we'd drive down to work together. And that worked out super well. And so one morning I went to pick him up, and usually he would be standing outside and waiting for me, but he wasn't out there. And I was like, what's going on? So I got out of the car and I went in, and I entered through the back, and I was in the kitchen. And the kitchen was a little ratty, but like I said, this is college, people. I mean, you know, it's that time of life when you ain't worried about cleaning that much, at least for some people. But anyway, so there wasn't anyone around, and I was like, where is Greg? And so I kind of called out, Greg, and I didn't hear anything until I heard like this boom, like from upstairs, and then I heard like this boom, 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 and I was like, what is that? And then I heard this distant, I'm so late. And I was like, what? And that was Greg. And then I hear this boom, 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 boom. And that was him coming down the stairs. And he comes running into the kitchen, and he's putting on his tie, and he's getting on his suit jacket coat. And I'm like, what is going on? He was just, I don't know. He was just running late that day. He'd overslept. But he was hungry. And this is one reason why I love Greg, because this man, this guy, this man, whatever you want to call him, he ate like there was no tomorrow. I just loved this. And this is one reason why he was just so attractive to me. Now, again, this is not a romantic relationship, by the way. He had a steady girlfriend that he married and that he's still married to now. So don't get the wrong idea. This is a friendship going on here. But anyway, so he was like, I'm hungry. So he was like, I've got to have breakfast. But we were running late at this point. Like, he was already making us late. And so he was like, well, here, I'll just pour some cereal and I'll eat it in the car. And I was like, okay. And so we did that. And so he put some cereal in the bowl, poured some milk in, and carried it out to the car. We got in the car, and he ate a cereal on the way to work. And so once we got to the parking garage and parked, he had a cereal bowl with the dregs of the milk in it and the cereal little pieces that he didn't want floating in it. And so we got out of the car, and he was like, I don't know what to do with this. And I was like, well, can you pour it down the drain? There's like a little drain in the parking garage on the floor. And he was like, he didn't want to do that. He felt like that would be polluting, and it probably would be, but I was like, just pour it down the drain. And then he was like, no, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And so I was like, okay. And so we just proceeded to go into the office building. Now, as I said, I worked for a law firm, and this law firm spanned a couple of floors of this high-rise office building. And there were other floors in there that, you know, other law firms occupied and other businesses occupied as well. And so we got on in the basement, because we were at the basement level coming in from the back in the alley. And so we were the only people on the elevator, and so he's riding up the elevator with his milk bowl. And however, the elevator stopped on the first floor, and when the doors opened, there were all the partners of the law firm, or most of them, getting on the elevator. And here's Greg with his bowl of milk. And so a lot of the partners looked at him, and they're like, having a little breakfast? And Greg's like, And I was just like, such a Greg thing. But Greg was like, yeah. And so he proceeded to go into the office kitchen and take care of his bowl in the proper manner. And he was just free to be Greg. It didn't matter. Okay, he was hungry. He wanted to eat. He ate. He didn't want to pour the milk down the drain and pollute. So he risked the embarrassment of getting on the elevator and having everyone run into him, which they did, and see him with his milk cereal bowl. And know that he hadn't brushed his teeth either. So All right, so that's one Gregism. Another one was again, like he was the courier of our firm, and so he was running around all day, and he had issues with his feet. Like I don't know exactly what it was, but he did have something wrong where like his feet would start hurting him at a certain point in the day, especially if he was wearing dress shoes. And so we were on our way home together, again, carpooling, and he had something to file. And this time he was driving, and the minute he had gotten in the car, he'd taken off his shoes. And we were driving, and we were not out of downtown yet, and we were passing the federal courthouse of downtown Nashville, and he was like, oh my gosh, I've got to file something here. And he goes, I've got to file something. So he whipped into the parking lot of the federal courthouse, and it's going on 5, so he's got to chop here because he's got to get in there and file this thing before 5 o'clock, before the clerk's office closed. And so he's like, getting the file up, and he's trying to get out of the car, and then he's like, his shoes are like in the back of the seat of the car, and he's like, he goes, I'm just going to run this in. And so he ran out of the car in his stocking feet and ran into the federal court. Now, again, it was nearly 5, and so as he gets to the door of the federal courthouse, the doors to the courthouse open up, and out flood the federal workers, seeing this courier in his stocking feet running into the building. And so, yet again, here's Greg, free to be who he was, and run in and make a filing in federal court in his stocking feet. You gotta love this. I have to say, I want to be this person. I want to be that person. All right, so another Gregism. We were on our way home yet again, and he had brought his laundry to take to the cleaners with him. And so I was like, oh, okay. And we had pre-planned this because I had mine too. So we were like ready. We were going to stop at the dry cleaners together. And so we get to the dry cleaners, and it's a drive-up thing. And so a woman comes out to pick up our bags from us. And so he hands her his bag, and I hand her my bag. And we're going over the work. And he's saying, I've got some shirts and some ties. And she's writing some things down. And then he stops, and he goes, wait a minute. I really want this shirt to be washed too. And he was like, so hold on. And so then he just proceeds to undress. He takes off his tie, and he takes off his shirt, and he's like, here, take this too. And now he was wearing an undershirt underneath that. But I was like, my God, the gall. But also just the freedom, like, okay, he needed that shirt to be cleaned, and he was just like thinking on the spot, and he had an opportune moment. Why not? So he just took it off, and I'm sitting there going, because this is something that wouldn't occur to me. Now, of course, it's harder for women. Of course, we can't take off our shirts and stuff. But in something like this, in situations like this, I just want to have the freedom to just, be who I am and just be a dork if necessary. So there's Greg in his undershirt going through the rest of his thing, and he's like, okay, good. All right. So this is just great. Okay, so then also we would go to lunch quite a bit together, and I'm telling you, he ate whatever he wanted. And so there was this one restaurant that we would go to where they had specials every day, and they also served these incredible yeast rolls. They were just huge. They were like this big, and they were delicious, they were buttery, they were warm, and they would give you 2 with every special that you ordered. Those are big yeast rolls, and then a big plate of the special. And of course, I'm sitting over there with my turkey sandwich, which is kind of my ballpark. But he gets the special, which is like a pot pie or something like that, and it comes with these rolls. And my dad actually had joined us for lunch that day, so we were all 3 eating together. And so we were all carrying on conversation, and he was talking to my dad. And my dad is, at this point, he was a judge. My father was a judge for most of his career. And so, that carries a little level of sort of authority. I don't know. But Greg was just free to be Greg in front of anyone. he really liked my dad, you know, he was just enjoying being there. And so we're all kind of sitting there, and people were coming by, lawyers that knew my dad were coming back and go by and saying, "Hey, Judge," and he was like, "Hey," you know. And so, and I was just kind of sitting there like, whatever, with my turkey sandwich. And Greg had his big pot pie and his yeast rolls, and he had plowed through the yeast rolls, and his mouth was full, and my dad was talking to him. And I'm sorry, my dad was talking to him, and Greg's like, mm-hmm. And the waitress passed, and Greg just couldn't help himself, and he just interrupted my dad and everybody, and he was like, "Miss, can I have some more rolls?" And my dad was like, and he kind of looked at me, and he was like, "He can eat a lot, can't he?" And I was like, you know, wait until later, Dad, until you see me and what I can eat, by the way. In this day and age, my dad, I think I've got one on Greg now. But anyway, it was hilarious. And it was just like, you know, he was just being himself. And I'm like, yes, I want that kind of freedom. I want that kind of freedom for me. I want this kind of freedom for you. And so these are just snippets. I could tell you more stories that he did, of funny things that he did. And I know that I'm not getting it across very well. And if you're sitting there going, "What's funny about this?" I'm sorry. But in the moment, you had to be there because it was hilarious. And like I said, he could always just be who he was. And he was also a good person too, extraordinarily nice and extraordinarily friendly, and always eating and not giving a rat's butt about what he ate either. Incredible. And so I wish him well wherever he is. And again, this is what I want for myself in future. So now let me get back to the apps thing. I started this video off talking about apps and these jokesters that have come up with apps. And when I heard this on the radio, I was like, ooh, this is a challenge. Let me see if I can come up with an app for me. And like, then it was like, yeah, crickets. Because I couldn't come up with anything. Now, I gave myself the excuse that I was so stressed by everything that I can't be funny in this moment. But I did think later, I was like, okay, I do have a couple of apps. Now, one of the apps, I want to say, comes from a viewer. Now, she didn't come up with the app, but she gave me the idea. So I want to give you credit, American Blonde, New York. Thank you so much for giving me the idea for this. She was talking about a new version of Project Runway that features Heidi Klum and Tim Gunn. And if you don't know who Tim Gunn is, basically on the original Project Runway show, which was a designer show, it was a show about creating designs for the runway. And it was a very creative show, and it's very interesting from that standpoint because you're given a theme and a time constraint, and you got to come up with a design, a look, a fashion look in that time constraint. So anyway, Tim Gunn functioned as basically the advisor to all the designers. And so he wasn't a judge. He was actually someone who came in to the design room, and he would go around to all the designers, and he would see how they were doing and progressing as the challenge went on. And a lot of times he would go up and he would look at what the designer was doing, and he'd be doing this. And he was so kind and gentle. He was very appropriate with what he said, and he was very careful with what he said. He was also direct. It's not like he was trying to hide things, but he was just extremely tactful. And so he was sitting there looking at designs. You know, he would do this over and over and over. And if something wasn't kind of hitting home with him, he'd be like, I don't know. And he'd give suggestions. And then finally he'd just get kind of frustrated, and he'd tell the designer, make it work. And that became a catchphrase. It became a catchphrase for the entire country, basically. Do a Tim Gunn and make it work. And so for me, I want an app that says, make it work. That's my Tim Gunn app. Make it work. All right. So thank you to the viewer who gave me the inspiration for that, and for mentioning Tim Gunn, and also the fact that we can come up with apps that make it work. All right, then the other app that I came up with is just an app that's personal for me. It may not work for you, but it's perfect for me, and that is the Pink Floyd filtration app. That is the app that blocks out Pink Floyd anytime it is played on the radio. All right, so those are my 2 apps. Please, if you come up with apps of your own, leave them in the comments. And also, if you want to be free like Greg, then just eat unrestrictedly, rest for a prolonged period, don't worry about body weight, and take care. Until next time, peace.